Welcome to the Afternoon Constitutional, and follow us online here on YouTube. And thanks again to the folks who haven't canceled us here yet, and to our folks who put us all together, which is the Government Accountability and Oversight folks at govoversight.org. And going to be joined here shortly with a dear friend, and do we have the pictures of the book? Jason F. Wright. He's also from Charlottesville, so don't hit Charlottesville so hard about everything. Jason, it's good to see you again. How are you doing, my friend?
I am doing well. Thanks for dragging out that intro long enough for me to race inside my office. I apologize for cutting it a little bit tight. Good to see you.
I didn't. I know you. I know everyone else heard you, and now I'm trying to triage. Oh, now I know why I didn't hear you. See, there's this high tech stuff like plugging in would be handy.
And I
Of
was
course, I'm
saying all
looking
these
for the
nice things
software
about you,
fix, and it's a
which you
hardware
still
fix.
can't
There it is.
hear, but that's fantastic. I was just saying all these good things about you, and now,
Now you have to
history won't
recant
remember
them.
any of
That's
it.
right. Well, you wouldn't be the first one this week, Jason. As I understand it, and first, the lauds about recovering Charles, and I know a lot of folks have had, odd relationships with their parents, and you can never write one book that covers them all. But I thought your book, Recovering Charles, was just perhaps one of the most brilliant ways to allow everyone else to kind of morph themselves into your characters and say, yeah, I mean, I can kind of see, and then take what was happening to your characters in tragedy and hopefully apply them pre-tragedy to their own lives. It's been a few years since you wrote the book. Do you run into people who say the same thing about recovering Charles?
I do. It's interesting. Of the 17, 18 books I've written, that is the one that people ask me about probably the least. But when they do, they are most passionate about it. They, like you have described today and eloquently a dozen times over the years, it's a deeply personal sort of a story that particularly about the relationship of fathers and sons, and so many people can relate either directly to that or just simply to their own parents, or just to the complex family
Yeah.
dramas in their own lives. And so people ask me about it a lot and want to talk it through a lot. And the alcoholism plays a role. Government and FEMA and the government's response to Hurricane Katrina plays a role. So there are a lot of talking points there, and people are passionate. I just wish it had done better.
Well, there's still time because you can still get it in the bookstores. It's not on the canceled. It's not on the banned bookshelves
Not yet.
yet at Barnes and Noble. Jason, and of course, people know you, your cultural phenomenon now, motion pictures and the best-selling Christmas jars. Obviously, as much as people don't ask you about recovering Charles, except me, people must at some point. Is it the point where you're saying, "Hey, I'm working on something new," or is it something that all people who become famous for some works of art have to understand that, sure, David Lee Roth is going to be asked to sing Panama at some point.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. If Elizabeth Gilbert of Eat, Pray, Love fame has talked about this. She's written a number of other books. No one ever talks about any of them. And from a sales perspective, you could add up all of her other titles and they wouldn't come close to what Eat, Pray, Love sold. John Grisham, Stephen King, everyone can point to early books that sort of set them on their path. Christmas Jars is still my best-selling book. The Wednesday Letters is probably
Yeah.
number 2 on that list, and was my second of the 18. So, yeah, it's pretty typical that people want to talk about, but part of it's just math, right? I mean, you've got more than a 1.2, 1.3 million people that have read Christmas jars, and that doesn't count people that have seen the movie either in a theater or streaming. So there are a lot more people out there to show up at library events, at book signings, at media gigs or whatever, and ask about it compared to some of the other titles. But I used to run a little bit from that. I used to think, you know what, I'd really love to talk about something besides Christmas jars, for example. But the older I've gotten, the grayer I've gotten. I'm really looking a lot like you, Joe Thomas. The more I think it's okay to be defined by a book that I think has um, started a movement and touched a lot of lives in a way none of us expected.
Well, and that's really, to me, the movement is, one of the things that literature can do that a lot of other media wishes we could do. Start that movement, get a ball rolling on something. I coined the phrase the other day. I said, "Make Americans great again," and I thought about it and I tweaked it a little bit because I think Americans are great. I think we need to be reminded about what makes Americans great, and that's why when you emailed me earlier today, I said he's the guy because he's always. There's a theme in your books that always seems to find, even if lost, that point, that place, you were like, oh yeah, I remember, I was great, and it brings you back to that place where you remember that inner sanctity that we all have, that we're all born here with. And I don't want to overblow, but it's something I noticed about all of your books as I've read them, that there's that feeling you feel like you want to be better at the end of it. Is that, I don't want to lay too much on you, and I know you've got some new projects coming up, but I had just said it the other day on my show. I said we really need to start reminding Americans about their greatness. Never mind making them great again. And here you come, and you're one of the best at that.
Well, I appreciate that. That means a lot coming from somebody with a good heart like you. I do think that we are, all of us individually and as families, collectively as communities, as a country, I think we are always better off than we think we are. The media in the world and schools and Hollywood tell us that the country is kind of on fire. Mm-hmm. And certainly we can do a whole lot better, but I do think we're doing better than we think we are. I think individually, you look in the mirror, you can find a great moment, even no matter how hard life has been, no matter how many mistakes you've made, thinking about some of those themes, from Recovering Charles again. Those characters can all look in the mirror, and though it's been hard, and though they have regrets, and though they have failures, as I do in my own life, I can look in the mirror and I can find some really special moments of greatness. We all can, and it's a matter of reminding ourselves of those so that we can have them again. And I agree with you very much that in the country right now we need reminders that there is more goodness around us than we might think.
So does that where your new project comes in? Because Jason was communicating with me earlier. He's working on some of the new ways to get information and stuff out there. Now, we're here on YouTube for while the supplies last, until they realize what we're doing, and then we'll probably have to find some other way to get the inventory out the video door. But you found as well in publishing, sometimes if it's not a superhero blowing up a building, it's kind of tough to get some page space there. So tell us what you're working on.
Yeah, great setup. It's even writers, if you're not innovating and thinking forward and finding new ways to reach your audience, then you're dying, and that's happening to a lot of authors. And so I had an experience about 6 months ago where I began to write a middle grade novel, a story that had been in my head for a few years, that I wrote and then I workshopped over Zoom with about 100 families around the country, all with elementary or early middle school kids. And I literally logged onto Zoom with them, as many as could join live on any given day. And I read them a chapter or 2 or 3 at a time. And then I asked them about it, and they told me what worked and what didn't. And we sort of workshopped this thing together over the course of 6 or 8 weeks. And then I began talking to publishers about it, and I had a number of people in publishing, agents, editors, all the way up the ladder, tell me, a male protagonist that checks these boxes won't sell in today's marketplace. This is not where the industry is going. So will you change the gender of the seventh grader from a boy to a girl, or will you change other characteristics about the character to make it a little bit more palatable to today's publishing world? i.e., can you make it more correct? And I hate labels. I'm not a fan of the woke label. I'm not a fan of all the politically correct stuff. I think labels are dangerous. Mm-hmm. But that is what they were telling me, is a kid from North Carolina who happens to be Caucasian, who happens to live a pretty sort of a traditional lifestyle. That's going to be a really hard sell. And so at a minimum, you've got to make them a young lady. And look, I have written, Christmas Jars, which you just talked about, the lead is a woman. So I am all about that. And I have embraced diversity in churches and schools around the country. I don't think you'd find an author that has demonstrated as consistently the power of seeing one another as individuals. But this story needs to be told from the point of view of this boy who I have come to love and know and create. And the idea that I would have to make some changes to the manuscript to make it palatable to publishing today, it left me. I had many sleepless nights, Joe, many sleepless nights. And so after talking to a couple of different people and sort of rallying some of the troops, I said, you know what? I've wanted to try a Kickstarter. I've wanted to try self-publishing and getting something right to readers, and this might be the time. So we're going to launch a Kickstarter on August 1st. We'll get the book into readers' hands 12 months faster than if I went the traditional publishing route. And more importantly, readers and schools, librarians, et cetera, will get the story that was envisioned in my head and written and workshopped with these kiddos around the country.
So I'm going to stick a pin in the obvious journalistic turn to where I try to pick you apart and get what the story is, because that's what we're supposed to do here. But your story is one I was just talking to a fellow, an intern with us, goes to Northwestern University and is somehow coming to learn something from me. I don't. Yeah, exactly. That was my facial expression exactly. So, but we were talking about he does a lot of work in the internet and the production online, and he's talking about doing sketches and things like that. And I said, what's interesting to me is you here you have an unlimited supply of off-Broadway theaters, basically, and coffee houses and concert venues and publishing houses, and yet it seems like the history of the internet has been one of unfulfilled opportunity, I guess, or potential to be that creator where you could tune in on a Wednesday and see the next Shakespeare writing some play, or read the next To Kill a Mockingbird, crowdfunded and put together for you. Is that what you're sensing? Is that maybe we just have been impatient for the internet to become that publishing house, that off-Broadway stage, that sketch comedy program that has been waiting for all these new people to tap into their creativity, Jason?
Yeah, I think we have become really content to be the audience, to be entertained. And we're not, perhaps enough of us, as this young man in your office is willing to say, you know what, I'm tired of being in the audience. I want to be on the stage, whatever that stage looks like, whether it's writing or blogging or becoming an influencer or creating sketch comedy or what you're doing right now on YouTube and have done for decades in radio. I think we've become complacent creatively as a country. And because the TikTok generation and the Instagram generation feeds us thousands and thousands and thousands of hours of content every 24 hours, we just sit and watch and become numb to the fact that we have our own story to tell. Mm-hmm. And that's the thing I'm so passionate about when I teach writers conferences, when I go into schools. I tell people it's great to be in the audience. We should consume good things that invite us to be better people. But you know what? Take your turn to tell your own story, whatever that looks like. And there has never been a bigger stage and a bigger audience in the history of the world than what the internet provides. I mean, this experience we're having right now with this thing on YouTube. I mean, Joe, there are how many billion people registered on YouTube around the world? Doesn't mean they're all going to watch it, even though they should. But the audience, I mean, I don't know how many listeners you have on a regular basis or how big the WCHV market is in Charlottesville, but it's infinitely larger right now because of what we're doing online. And if we don't take advantage of that, we are missing one of the greatest gifts and innovations in world history, and take advantage of it wisely, because the internet, as we know, can be a cesspool of lost opportunity as well.
Well, and it at least gives us a great juxtaposition when you're doing something good and you're like, oh, well, it's obviously better than that. And you're right about that. I mean, I studied television in 1977, and there were 3 television stations and the networks that were associated with them when I got out of my class, and it became clear the kind of thought processes might have. The teacher pulled me aside and he told me right after I had broken all of the rules in my final project, he said, if you like doing that, don't go into television. And I enjoyed the theater. I enjoyed acting. I enjoyed watching my kids take turns in the theater and in acting and singing. And I understand the performance of it, but I felt like, okay, if that, he said you're just going to be stuck holding a camera for a weatherman out on the corner of 5th and Broadway, and now we have all these TV stations and TV networks that do actually function in a lot of ways. YouTube has gotten a lot of criticism because I think they do behave in an awful lot of ways like a traditional Dumont network or anything, where they say, that was funny for a little while, but no more of that for you. But do you think, Jason, and I know your last book, Even the Dog Knows, you did sort of a similar thing. You workshopped it with a lot of folks. You incorporated Zoom. You let your fan club kind of get into the process of writing. I imagine some of the folks you work with in workshops as well, working on it. Is that important to have that friction, though? It's one thing to just go out and say, I'm just going to do whatever I want, however I want. But somebody saying, think about that for a second. I think it has an important role there, that editor, that publisher that says, is that the way you want to tell that chapter? I'm not saying change it whole hog like these publishers were saying, can you make it a girl? Because I don't think, Tom Sawyer becomes a better story if it's Teresa Sawyer. Right. But that being said, there is a place for, some editorial friction to somebody saying, I wasn't so thrilled with that chapter and that kind of thing. That's important, too, to the creative process, isn't it?
It is. And I'm writing down that line. Tom Sawyer doesn't become better as Teresa Sawyer for future interviews, because I'm going to be on Fox or CNN or somebody's going to ask me and I'm going to say, you know what? This just occurred to me right now on the spot. Tom Sawyer wouldn't have been better. That's good. I did. I wrote that down. It's right there.
All right,
that's
very good. When I'm listening to you and Glenn Beck talk about it, and that'll be good. But what about my thought about the need for a certain amount of, whether it's your spouse or your editor, your publisher, somebody who you've known a long time who will sneak in and say, hey, should you really have this chapter in 17-Second Miracle about some guy on a radio named Joe Thomas at WCHV? True story, by the way, it's in there. But because I've always had bosses who are the first one to say, if it doesn't add to it, it takes away from it. And I've always appreciated them doing that for me. Is that something, that you still need to find if you're kind of out there doing it for yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that if you don't recognize as an independent creator, I mean, I'm self-employed. I work quite literally. I work for the people who pull out their debit card and buy the book at the store or on Amazon, or who pay me to come speak at their school or at their corporate gig or whatever. They're literally signing my paychecks, right? I mean, that's how I'm paid. Is through that audience. They are my employers, and I have had books that performed really well, i.e. the boss liked it, and so they kept supporting it. and I had books that didn't perform as well. And if I don't learn from that, then I'm not going to have the opportunity to do this very long. So I think other, I mentioned Patterson earlier. He's talked about this before. He talks about it on his masterclass a little bit. Stephen King has talked about this as well. Yes, you have things you want to say and stories that are in you that you feel like you need to tell. And if you want to just write for you, that's okay. I teach a lot of young writers at the end of the process, when the manuscript is done and you can't get an agent and you can't get a publisher and you're the only one who ever reads it. If you're literally the only reader of that 80,000 word novel, but you're better for having written it, then wasn't it worth writing? I mean, if you're the audience of one, that might be worth it. That's one thing. But if you want to write for an audience, if you want to earn money writing for an audience, if you want to earn money on a radio show, and building a career as you have, then you better say things that resonate with people, and you better be responsive. If suddenly people start stopping you, Joe, on the street and saying, "What's happened to your show? It's awful. I don't agree with anything you say. Your interviews are terrible. I don't like your haircut. Like I'm just not interested anymore." Well, your audience fades to your wife. Right. Bless her. She'd be the only one left listening. Maybe.
No, she'd be the first one. No. She would be the first one saying, the mortgage has to get paid with what you do, so you better keep being well listened to.
Yeah. So there's a balance, I think, between being true to the art, i.e., I'm not changing this character to a young lady. It's just, that's another book. All right. It's not this one. The balance between that, being true to what I think the audience needs to hear, and being responsive. So I took lots of feedback. I mean, some of the best edits in the manuscript came from 5th and 6th graders who said on the Zoom, Mr. Wright, what about da-da-da-da? And I said, oh, you're right. That would work better. So I'm all about taking feedback from the audience and improving. And I think all artists do that. I was explaining to somebody just the other day, like when you're a baseball player and you're learning to play baseball and you want to go pro, I mean, you could just go by yourself to a batting cage and spend hour after hour after hour just standing there with the bat and swinging, and you might be okay. But until you listen to other people who help coach and mentor and model, just like your kids on stage, your kids are better on stage because they've had mentors that help them, right? And you've had mentors in radio. So it's the balance between being open to learn, to improve, and then being true to who you are and the stories you want to tell the world.
Now, the story is the thing. It always has to be, whether it's a radio show, that we're telling stories here. Some people think it's fiction. Some people think it's news and analysis, but that's okay. We'll leave that for their debate. So, Jason, without giving away too much about the book, again, how do people find the Kickstarter? I've put the link. It's jasonfwright.com up on the screen. But you truly give us a little taste. I don't want to give away too much here because I'm compelled when an author says, no, this has to be the way the story is told. Now I really want to know what the story is because that's an important thing. The vehicles are very important.
So a young man in the 7th grade, being raised only child by his sweet mother in Wilmington, North Carolina, loses her tragically in a sort of an unusual accident over the holiday break.
Oh, God.
And this requires relocation to, of all places, Highland, Utah, where he will be raised by his grandparents. His grandparents come out to North Carolina, and with his grandpa, he drives in a U-Haul from one side of the country to the other to start this new life. Well, when he walks into this biggest school he's ever seen in this very strange new world, he has a story, a secret, and a scar, a fresh scar on his right cheek. And he's got to decide who he's going to be, how honest he's willing to be. In the process, he meets a Hindu boy across the street named Kabir, another neighbor named Ink, a young lady, and the three of them become best buds. Well, over the course of the next few months of the school year, this young man is going to be put in a position more than once to be true to himself and fail. And he's going to learn a little bit about racial diversity, about religious diversity. He's going to learn a little bit about the truth. And the climax of the book will be an opportunity for him to stand on stage at a speech competition in front of the entire 7th grade to present himself. What
Wow.
version of himself will he present? Does he have the courage to finally tell the truth? And to teach us what I think is the most important lesson of the book, that we all have scars, and we have the power to make them beautiful if we choose. The book is called Scar Dakota. That's the lead character's name. And people can find the Kickstarter link. Again, you can preview it now. We're in the pre-launch phase. So what started today, by the way, you were the first person that I've talked to about this. It literally started, I don't know, 10 hours ago this morning. So the Facebook event page is up. If you search Jason Wright author, you'll find it. If you go to scardakota.com, you will find it. Learn a little bit more about the book, about me, and about this cause to disrupt publishing and to tell the story the way I meant it to be told. And then be ready on August 1st to back the project.
All right, so now I'm going to completely forget all about that and say, oh my God, Jason, I don't think there's been, like I said, Discovering Charles, if I'm the only person who's ever read that book, I bawled. I literally cried visible tears on a Greyhound bus sitting next to a guy listening to thrash metal in his headphones. I was just like, this is bad. But if I was the only person who ever read that book, so be it. And I cherish it. But today, the kids, Jason, I feel like the guy with all the gray hair in this picture. The kids, this is to me what every young person is facing in some sort of abstract, no matter what the milieu, whether it be their, who they love, what their family is, what they want to do with their lives, what their family wants to. I mean, it may not be new pressures, but it sure is exacerbated in the world of the social media accounts and the TikToks and everything else. I would hope that this book challenges Christmas jars, because I can't think of a subject matter that doesn't clang a carol on for this day and age. And I'm not trying to overdo it here. I mean, it's just listening to the content of the story, just the elevator pitch. And this is everything we hear from therapists, from parenting experts, from school psychologists, the honest ones, not the ones who are just trying to get a paycheck from whoever hashtagged the woke word. But this is a fastball right down the pipe, Jason.
Oh, Joe, I appreciate that. I hope that's true. I hope people will will embrace not just the book, but the kind of the story behind it, and the movement, and this idea that, creators should have some creative control over the things that they bring to market. If you've never backed a project on Kickstarter, it's incredibly easy. There are thousands and thousands of projects. And the way it works, if you're new to it, is on Kickstarter.com, you find a project that's interesting to you. It could be a book, a movie, it could be a new cell phone holder. It could be a fancy new couch that folds into a giant unicorn. You name it, and you can find it on Kickstarter. And the campaign sets a goal, and you're backing toward that goal. If the campaign hits the goal, then you're billed and you get your widget, whatever that thing is that the campaign's creating. If the campaign does not hit the goal, then you never pay anything. And the campaign, I move on and do something else. So take a minute, get familiar with the Kickstarter campaign platform, look at all the other great campaigns out there. It's something that it's a huge gamble, Joe, because it's going to be hugely embarrassing if we don't hit our goal. And if we can't publish the book this way, it'll be tough. But I just believe in people, and I believe the story needs to be told.
Well, I'm just knowing the little bit of the story. I want to read it. You said people can kind of preview it a little bit on there as well, Jason?
Yeah, if you go to scardakota.com,
okay,
you can read a preview. And if you happen to host a wildly popular radio show in my hometown, then you get a PDF copy emailed to you today. I think is how that works.
No. Well,
I'll send it to you today.
Oh, I really, truly, as somebody who, has sweated out 3 children of his own, and I know that you as well, and they see them go off into the world and become great adults at this stage in their life. we need to tell stories like this. So please, it's Kickstarter. Look up Scar Dakota. I'm saying it.
ScarDakota.com.
ScarDakota.com. Jason, God bless you, sir, and for. I hate using this word, but democratizing the process to bringing everyone into the writer's room with you. It's just like every time I pick up the phone line, I don't know who's there and I don't know what they want to talk about. I just have to be ready to pick up on it and see what they're saying. So bless you for that, taking that leap as well.
Thanks, man. You're a good man. Thanks for being responsive. There aren't many people that actually, especially in the media, that you can get this quickly and say, "Hey, I've got an idea," and a couple hours later you're talking about it. So thank you for that. I appreciate your friendship through the years.
Well, and if you are still interested in about 3 weeks, I know somebody who's going to be filling in on a nationally syndicated radio show. He might need a guest or two. So just saying, just don't lose that. Don't lose my number, okay?
Hypothetically, I will not lose your number, Ricky. Thank you.
I put the pathetic in hypothetically. Jason, God bless you, sir. You have a great day.
Thanks, man. Take care. Bye-bye.
And thank you for joining us today on the afternoon. God, tell me that story isn't exactly what we need. I mean, I haven't read it yet. Now, apparently, I have a PDF copy of it coming to me. But my gosh, tell me you haven't heard at least 16 experts somewhere saying kids need to get back into, being true to who they are. It's Jason's gift. I'm telling you again, like I said, if you've ever read any of is the new one, and look it up and get to that Kickstarter. Thank you for joining us on the afternoon Constitutional. I'm going to go download that PDF right now and use up all the paper in the company printer. And until tomorrow, so long, and thanks for all the fish.